And now I've got the very distinct pleasure of introducing a young lady by the name of Maddy. And Maddy in the Lamar Circle is known as Wonder Woman. And once you have a chance to hear her story, you will understand why. So anyway, Maddy, we love you. Come on up and share your story. Thank you.
My name is Maddy Boehme, and I have a disease called autoimmune encephalitis. Autoimmune encephalitis is where one day my body decided that it was going to start attacking my brain. It classified my brain as a foreign object, and this is my journey with autoimmune encephalitis.
I remember the night that everything kind of went haywire, and she just kept crying and crying and crying, and pretty soon she started looking at me, and then it became apparent that she couldn't communicate what was going on, and that was such a defining moment because there was a definite beginning.
It was very evident she couldn't speak. She just couldn't speak. And so, you know, me being the brilliant guy, I thought, well, if you can't speak, surely you can write. So I can remember handing her a sheet of paper and a pen, and it was really interesting because she would grab the pen, she could do that fine, she'd hold the paper, and that was fine. And as she went to write, she got about 1.5 inches away from the paper. And when it came time to try and close that last little gap to write, she just couldn't get the tip of the pen to the paper, and then the crying continued, and we took her to the ER at that point.
My dad told me, he was like, "Maddy had to go to the hospital last night." You know, I mean, when somebody that you talk to almost daily that never has had an issue in the past, all of a sudden is up in the hospital, you know, your mind kind of goes places. And they said, you know, we don't know what's wrong. It's probably just was a lot of stress. But to me, I was like, there's no reason that stress should cause you a lack of ability of speech. And things just kept progressing, and it got to where it wasn't just like crying, it was, you know, like non-human type, you know, reaction. And it very obviously was not just caused by panicking or stress, and it you know, it got pretty concerning.
Yeah, my name is Maddy Boehme. Thank you guys so much for coming out and listening to my story today. It means the world to me. So starting off, show of hands, how many of you have ever heard of a paradigm shift? Okay, so quite a few of you. To be honest, I hadn't until about 2 weeks ago after I was talking with my parents. Apparently, it's a rather common concept, but for those of you who are like 2 weeks ago me, a paradigm shift is an important change that happens when the usual way of thinking about or doing something is replaced by a new and different way. Now, I found this concept to be fascinating because I thought this is exactly what had happened to me in my life. I had this shift in my thinking that changed the way I lived my life forever. My paradigm shift was on my 19th birthday, and I remember the moment clear as day where this new shift in my perspective just clicked in me. But I'll get back to sharing more about that later. Now, you're probably wondering what happened to me that completely changed the way I looked at and lived my life. Well, up until my sophomore year of high school, I had a fairly what would be considered normal life in our society. I went to school every day, I got straight A's, I was ranked 5th in my class. Yeah, school was a piece of cake for me. I I was in extracurricular activities outside of school hours. I had a fantastic group of friends. We spent every weekend hanging out and having a good time. My only real worries in life were stuff like what I was going to wear tomorrow or if I was going to get a good grade on that geometry test. You know, typical high school problems. I had a great home life, a great family, supportive parents. Siblings I got along with fairly well most of the time. Life was easy for me, and I had never really known any true struggle or hardship. Little did I know that was all about to completely change. It was about halfway through my sophomore year of high school, I started having these weird spells, we called them, where I would lose the ability to walk and talk. I would cry uncontrollably for hours at a time, and I had no idea why I was crying. At first, this happened every couple of months, but as time went on, these spells became more frequent and severe to the point where I was missing a lot of school. About 30 days by the end of my sophomore year. It was clear that there was something going on with me. Junior year rolled around and things continued to progress. And while my classmates were all out doing regular high school things like finding dates for the prom or going to high school football games, I was often headed for the ER. I was such a frequent flyer at our local ER, it got to the point where most of the hospital staff knew me by name. In fact, some can still remember me to this day. When they'd see me come in, they'd already know exactly what to do. The only thing they really knew to do for me was to load me up with large amount of painkillers and sedatives until my body would finally quit these mysterious, rampant crying rages. These drugs would often leave me stoned for days. There was one time, after being in the ER, I was admitted to the hospital to be monitored overnight. But even to this day, I have absolutely no recollection of my stay. The visits in the ER eventually became so routine that they became a blur in my doped-up memory, and the strange spells became my new day-to-day reality. Because of this, I missed my junior year of high school and instead went to several doctors searching for answers. Some of them didn't really know what was wrong with me. Some of them said these bizarre spells were all in my head, and I quote, one doctor told me I needed to go home and find a good therapist. I remember after one ER visit, I was actually almost admitted to a psychiatric facility. That was pretty scary. Things continued to morph and progress, and I was often irritable for no reason. It was not super pleasant to be around, as my parents can attest to. One of my closest friends at the time described me as impulsive with a crazy mood and a bad memory. Because of this, I struggled to keep friends and often found myself lonely and homebound due to complications from the disease. While many doctors couldn't crack my mysterious case, eventually we came across one doctor who could. I ended up being diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease called autoimmune encephalitis, which essentially means that one day, for unknown reasons, my body mistakenly decided to start attacking my brain. This attack leads to inflammation in my brain and causes all kinds of neurological and psychiatric problems. Autoimmune encephalitis, if left untreated, results in neurological deterioration and eventually coma and death. This doctor had saved my life. You see, most people with this disease, because of how misunderstood and rare it is, most are told it's all in their head and end up in psychiatric facilities like I almost did. They go undiagnosed, fall into a coma and die, and I was lucky enough to survive. But survival didn't come without its challenges, of course. Every waking day of the last few years of my life had been spent in the clutches of this bully, I called it, that we struggled to tame. It weighed me down with constant fatigue and pain like nothing I had ever experienced before. Every day my brain felt like it had been tossed in a frying pan and seared to a crisp, and it was exhausting. Physically and psychologically exhausting. You see, I tried to ignore my disease, push through the pain, and pretend as if my body had the capabilities of a normal person. I've been trying for years to live like everyone else, to live a quote-unquote normal life. You know, the typical go to high school, go college, get a job, get married, raise a family, the American dream. I craved that and I chased after that. And I mean, rightfully so, everybody wants a normal, successful life, right? Now back to my 19th birthday and this paradigm shift of mine I told you about earlier. At my 19th birthday, I had been dealing with the pain, the crashes, and this less than normal life for almost 3 years. I was just waiting for a magic pill to get me back to my old struggle-free self. I had tried several different treatments, and some of these treatments seemed to help, but none of them seemed to fix me enough to the point where I had a normal life like everybody else my age. I was hopeful about finding a solution, and I spent years of my life thinking, all right, this is the treatment that's going to get me back to my old self and my old life. Years spent in this weird, almost purgatory-like state of waiting around, expecting to get better at some point. Well, I should have known that nothing in my life was ever going to turn out how I expected. During this appointment I had on my 19th birthday, my doctor explained to me that we had done everything he knew to do for this disease. I'll never forget the moment he looked me in the eyes and said, "This is as good as it's going to get." Let me tell you, this is not the best birthday gift I'd ever gotten. I was crushed as the reality of my disease hit me. I would never have a normal life I craved or be my old struggleless self again. This was it for me. This was my new normal. As you can imagine, it was pretty heartbreaking to have all your expectations of ever getting better completely yanked out from under you. Everything you had ever hoped of and dreamed of doing in your life taken from you instantly. I grieved, as anyone would. I spent the rest of the day pretty down in the dumps. My mom actually took me to one of my favorite restaurants, Cheesecake Factory, later that day, and I broke down in tears at the table, unable to shake the news and enjoy the rest of my birthday. Life went on, and after a few days of grieving, I came face to face with my reality, which is when I had this paradigm shift. And I was faced with a choice for my life. I could continue to be down in the dumps about my situation, turn to unhealthy ways of coping with things, live my life in denial, stuck on an endless roller coaster of physical and psychological crashes, and just be plain miserable the rest of my life trying to chase the normal that never would be. But instead on that day, I made a different choice for my life. I decided to stop waiting around expecting everything to be normal again. I realized that life is about letting go of our expectations about what life should be, about what society tells us our life should look like, or what normal is. You see, life is about taking the challenges we're given and defying expectations. And it was that shift in my thinking that was so incredibly freeing. I chose to start living the life I've been waiting around all these years to live. Because this disease is so unpredictable in nature, I don't know what the future holds for my health. Every day is different, and things can change in the blink of an eye. So I live for every day that I'm given, since I was so lucky to be given a second chance at life. So now, let me tell you a little bit about what my new normal day-to-day reality looks like, because although I appear relatively normal to all of you, looks can be deceiving. I've been living with this disease for about 5 years now. I still deal with the occasional excruciating head pain and these strange spells every so often. I receive IVIG infusions every other week to put good people's antibodies into my body. This dilutes the levels of bad antibodies in my system and makes my symptoms less severe. At times, depending on disease activity, I can be on a lot of steroids, which makes me look like a human marshmallow. As a 21-year-old girl, this kind of sucks. My face gets really puffy and I look like a close cousin of the Michelin Man. Not my favorite. I also periodically receive chemotherapy to wipe out my bad cells and to try and stop my body from attacking my brain. As for school, I'm fortunate enough to be able to attend, but only part-time. I haven't been able to take on a full course load since my sophomore year of high school. At times I've had to take semesters off because of unexpected flares with my disease, and I'm currently in my 3rd year of my 2-year degree. Because of the way autoimmune encephalitis affects the brain, it can cause some permanent changes. I deal with residual issues of ADHD, dyslexia, depression, and anxiety on a daily basis, and I've had to learn how to overcome these obstacles and use my newly structured brain. I'm unable to work while attending school, so I currently reside with my fabulous parents, as every 21-year-old dreams of. I struggle to live the life of a normal college student, but I'm so incredibly lucky to be alive. So, yeah, my life is for those in the hospital, for those who didn't make it. I speak because I am lucky to be diagnosed, to receive as good of treatment as I do, and I feel it's my responsibility to use my voice because I have been given the chance to do so. In my quest to speak for my AE community, I was selected as a member of my hospital patient advisory council, and I've been able to give back to the people and place that saved my life. I've shared my story with the local newspaper and news stations to raise awareness for this peculiar disease. I had the opportunity to speak to a classroom of kids at the school I attended growing up. I was selected as a storyteller for a local event called Beacon Story Lab Live, and I shared my story here in Sioux City. A documentary on my journey with autoimmune encephalitis is currently in the works, and you guys saw a little preview of it before I came up here and spoke. That's been shared all over online with the AE community. I'll actually be taking that video with me to Cornell in New York at the beginning of April, where it will be shown to several doctors at the first ever symposium for autoimmune encephalitis. Super cool. I've had people from all over the world with this disease messaging me on Facebook, telling me how much they can relate to my video and how they feel less alone in their struggles. It's just incredible. It blows my mind. My number one ultimate goal in life is to leave this world better than I found it. And through my suffering, I've been given the opportunity to do so. Kind of cool how triumph can come out of tragedy, isn't it? I've been blessed with so many unexpected opportunities to share my story and raise awareness for autoimmune encephalitis because of this paradigm shift, this perspective shift I had in my thinking. My 19th birthday could have been the worst day of my life. But I chose to take my life, to take this unfortunate situation I was given, and look at it in a new and different way, to make the best of it and use it to help others. We are capable of doing great things when we let go of what we expect the plan for our life to be and trust there is greater in embracing the unexpected. The path we choose for our lives will ultimately affect the outcome of not only our lives, but the lives of others. So now I challenge you to do the same, to think about your life and the unexpected situations you faced. Chances are you've probably had some of your own paradigm shift moments. How can you use these perspective-altering life experiences to help other people? How can you take the challenges faced in life and defy expectations? Thank you. And now my parents are going to come up and share a little bit about their experience with this disease.
We didn't plan this all very
Me,
well.
so-
I think the best thing for me to do is not speak.
You have to talk into the microphone, and the people that are on
No.
the phone won't be able to
You
hear.
can.
Right here on this.
Oh, Lordy.
Here we go. We have a whole bunch of people.
We need the
listening.
lab, or does this work?
You can use this one, but you
Okay.
have to push this.
Okay, why don't we use that instead? So, yeah,
Feedback.
following that, I think probably the less said the better. But, it's been an interesting run, obviously, and after hearing that, you can see it's been a long run for all of us. But I talked to Paul a little bit about what is it that I would transfer or communicate to you in terms of should you run into a similar situation. And I guarantee there's people sitting in this room that have challenges as well. We all do. The more we've traveled this path, the more we've learned that everybody has something they're carrying. And if nothing else, it has made us extend a different kind of grace towards folks because everybody has a burden. faith is very, very important to us. I have no idea how we run this path without it. It's our grounding point. It's become more important to us as we come along. I look specifically at my situation. You know, the ironic part of all this is it really flared up right in the middle of some interesting times in my career. We had a change in mindset that unfortunately was directed right at my team. I spent 2 years eliminating 70 positions. And what Maddy's example, I'm the big soft one. I like to claim that I'm the bouncer type, but I am so but, you know, when we all look at what we do professionally every day inside, I'll just call it the four walls, keeping a perspective on that, that's one of the greatest gifts that I received from the situation that Maddy's been dealing with, and that is there's so much more important in life than what goes on in the four walls. You know, we all got to get our jobs done. That's a given. We all got to do it with excellence. But it really taught me as I traveled that interesting path that you got to focus on what's important, and it's standing here with me. It taught us as a family. I'm going to quit talking about that because that's obviously hard. But as a family, you know, we have 2 other kids. I have a son who's enrolled at the University of Iowa. He's a freshman this year. We have a little one, not so little anymore, but she's 13. And, you know, something like this can really consume your time, your effort, constantly reminding yourself, hey, we got 2 other kids that we need to make sure we're paying attention to. You know, not to take anything, especially after you said such nice things about us. You know, that constant balance of this is the focal point, because we're talking, you know, literally life and death. But you can't forget about the other 2 in the process, and those are a few of my takeaways. Nothing as eloquent as what Madison put forward. Like I said, I should have just not spoken, and we should have dropped the microphone and walked out. But I guess, are there questions? You know, I hate to have us just stand here and spout at you the whole time. Are there questions you have for us, please?
What doctor found out or diagnosed you?
Okay. So the doctor's name is Dr. Young Oliver, and he is a neurologist at Children's in Omaha. So yes, he's a very, very smart guy. He actually told us once he used to be a, what is it? An astrophysicist, but that was too boring for him, so he became a doctor. So that just gives you a little perspective on how, like, incredibly genius this man is. So yeah, good question, thank you.
She was actually the first person he had ever diagnosed with it. He had read about it before. And interestingly enough, you know, in a town the size of Lamar's, we got to know all of the ER doctors very well. And we actually had one of the doctors there tell us, this is the kind of thing that I remember us reading about in med school, and they told us you'll never see it, so we're not going to spend any time on it. You know, and we thought maybe we should go buy a lottery ticket if we were so lucky to get one thing that we ever had. Kind of works.
Where can the people find that video clip and share it with others?
Yeah, so the cards that you have on your table on the back, if you use your phones, it'll take you to a link that has that YouTube video. It has the video I showed you right here, and then it also has a video of a talk I did in Sioux City a couple of months ago too. So I also have a Facebook page too if you want to follow my journey. It is very much my goal to be a voice for this disease and to bring awareness, because that's exactly what this disease needs right now. So if you like my page, support my page, it helps give me a voice. It means the world to me. I can't thank you enough. So yeah. I'll just be sharing my experiences with whoever wants to follow. So
Heidi, would you share a little bit more of your perspective from the mom's side?
my mama bear.
Hoping I didn't have to talk. I was thinking about this a lot on the way down, like what is the one thing that I would like to communicate the most? And John does a really good job of this. Nothing is wasted with God. And talk about expectations. Our expectations for our children is not to have to watch them go through things like this. And as a parent, and a lot of you can probably relate to this, there is, I'm crying. I'm not gonna look that way. There's nothing more difficult than watching your child suffering and pain and you can't do a darn thing about it. And I cannot tell you the amount of times in the middle of a dark room, God, why? I know you are able. I know you are willing. Why are you not doing anything about this? And you know, I grew up in a strong Christian family with what I would consider to be a very solid faith, but there are things that kind of shake you to the core and make you question, why do you believe what you believe? For some people, that probably takes them down a path away from God, but for me, and I've communicated this with some other people, it took me from trusting God with a little t to trusting God with a capital T. And when all you have is God to trust, you learn because there's nothing else to trust Him. And I shared the story. We were in the day she talked about that she was in the hospital in Mars overnight that she doesn't remember. They actually ended up transferring her to Omaha. And, you know, oftentimes John would have to stay at home because we had 2 other kids that needed to be cared for and were concerned as well. And she and I were at the hospital in Omaha, and she had another flare. For 3 hours straight, she screamed and cried, and she would pull at her hair, and the nurses would come in the room with tears in their eyes. They just didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. And just stand there for 3 hours watching your child scream and crying. And when they finally got her body under control, I went out in the hallway and I just sat with my hands in my head, and one of the nurses came by and just kind of grabbed me on the shoulder, and that's all she squeezed my shoulder. And I remember at that point saying to God, I had this vision of Abraham laying Isaac on the altar, and I just did this with my hands, and I thought, you know what, God, if you're going to take her, take her. You do what you want, but I'm trusting you that whatever you're doing, you have a purpose in it. Now, see, I'm crying. This is not supposed to be a downer thing, but there is something very freeing and liberating of being able to turn it all over to Him and know. And I look at, you know, just sitting watching her share her story today, I would have never imagined that this was going to be the future that she had planned. And so all those times that we prayed and prayed and prayed for God to heal her instantaneously or to lead us to the right doctor, and it seemed like our prayers weren't being answered, there was a bigger agenda, there's a bigger plan, and that's still being revealed. We still don't know what that's going to be, but there's a level of trust that comes from knowing it's, you know, we continue to pray. I continue to pray for her to be healed. I don't ever want to watch her go through that again, but I know it's probably coming down the road. But I also know that I'm seeing one piece of a 1,000,000-piece puzzle, and I can't see the whole picture. But as the pieces start to fill in, the picture is much more beautiful than anything I